There we go. Welcome. I'm Karen Lindwall-Borg, and this is the National Association of Christian Women Entrepreneurs 2 p.m. Community and Education webinar on Zoom. This is a weekly occurrence. It's one of the highlights of my week, no matter what kind of week I'm having. And I say that because this has been a crazy week so far, and I'm hoping it doesn't continue to be this crazy throughout the rest of the week. I'll pray that for me, and I'll pray that for you as well. We are focusing on entrepreneur wellness for the whole year of 2020. And, let me mute somebody. Some noise, background noise. Then we're focusing on physical wellness for the month of March. So we're going to kick us off, I think, in a really strong way, talking about physical wellness for the month of March. We use the acrostic beliefs that is in the wellness book, Wellness, the Awareness of the Whole Individual, written by a bunch of counselors that have worked with me in my former career. And we found this acrostic. We don't even know where we found it, but we got someone to come up with a logo for us: body, emotions, livelihood, intellect, environment, family, friends, and spiritual. So we talked about spiritual wellness all month last night. All month. You can tell I'm really trying to gear up this week. Man, that's what happens when you go out of town. No going out of town. We talked about spiritual wellness the whole month of February. And we started with spiritual wellness, and we'll probably touch on it every month from here on out because, of course, it's the umbrella under which we operate as Christian women entrepreneurs. I love that. We'll talk about physical wellness this month and emotional wellness the next month. And then, of course, we could talk about occupational wellness every day until the cows come home, because it's kind of where we live and what we love to do. And it's what satisfies our work and our budget and all of those things. It's what makes my world go round. I don't know about you. So just kind of give you an overview of what we're getting ready to work through each month. We will touch on one of those dimensions of wellness. In 1 Corinthians 6:19, it says, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own." And so we will talk all month long about taking care of our physical bodies so that we can do what God has called us to do. I'm going to pray us in and give you a little overview of who you're going to hear from this month, and not do a lot more. And when after we pray in, I want you to take a minute, pop in and tell us your name, your location, and your primary goal. Should have said for March. For March. And then in the chat room, tell us more. You can tell us as much as you want in the chat room. Your name, your location again. Your primary entrepreneur endeavor may be linked to what your primary goal for March would be. Pardon me. And then a link to you. We want to be able to find you. And that can be any link that you want to provide for us, anyone at all. We're going to hear from Melanie. Melanie is a family nurse practitioner. She's going to talk to us about making wise and healthy choices and your power to choose. We're going to hear from Angie. She's going to talk to us about the 4 pillars of an effective wellness plan. I've gotten a sneak peek at her stuff. It's pretty great. We're going to hear from Clarissa on how to use physical activity as an act of worship. I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to hear from Jerry on balanced physical habits. And then, because we have a 5th Tuesday in the month of March, when we have a 5th Tuesday, we do something special. So we will still this month, sometimes we meet 3 days in a row, 5 days in a row. We bring in a special guest speaker. And this month we're going to meet from right here from 2 to 5 on March the 31st with Diane Cunningham. And she has an entire program and a workbook on Amazon and all sorts of things based on Nourish. She has testimony after testimony of being, I'm 5'5", she's probably 5'7", of being way over 200 pounds and then being way under what she really should be as well. She's gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. And over the last 5 years has just finally found a good balance and is using her coaching skills to create a program for us called Nourish, How to Live a Satisfied Life. lots of other testimonies about abuses of her body as well that I'm sure she'll share with you. And if you've met her, you've heard them, because she's very willing to speak openly about what she's been through. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. We'll meet from 2 to 5. We'll have a few breaks in there, but she'll have a lot to offer, and I think you'll be pleased. Let me pray for us and get us started. Hey, Jerry. Father God, we're so grateful for, oh my goodness, I mean, just to be able to get online and meet with people like this in this sort of forum without sometimes even having to leave the comfort of our home and leave our work behind. It's such a blessing. We need each other. We need to see each other's faces and hear each other's voices and pray for one another and encourage one another in the works that you've called us to do. We need each other when we are having a discombobulated day like I have had, trying to get back into the groove after being away from technology for 6 or 7 days has just thrown me from just off the loop. I'm just really I'm glad someone else is speaking today. So we're grateful. This is what we need each other for. We're grateful for the focus on physical wellness, Lord. It's such a struggle in the world that we live in when there's, there are opportunities not to take care of our bodies more than there are opportunities to take care of our bodies, it seems. And so we just pray that as you remind us of your plan for our physical wellness as well as for our wholeness, that you'll be with each speaker who comes to us this month. We're praying for that schedule too, because we're trying to switch some folks around, and we just need one more answer before it all falls into place, Lord. So we just pray that your hand is on this whole month, on every speaker, on Melanie, on Angie, on Clarissa, on Jerry, and on Diane, and on me, and on Danica, our education coordinators. We try to get this all out there for the enjoyment and the encouragement and inspiration of our NACWE sisters, whom we love so much, Lord. May everything we do today and then in the days to come be pleasing to you. And we ask these things in Jesus Christ's holy name. Amen. So Melanie, if everybody already probably kind of knows it, so you might as well know. Hey, Angela. Melanie is our daughter, my daughter. And Melanie started out as a midwife, and then I'm going to tell on you, wasn't married, and her dad died when she was 6 years old. So I said, I don't know, I'm glad I said it, but I said, if you're not married, keep going to school. Just keep going to school. Make sure that if anything like that ever happens to you, you at least have an education that you can fall back on. Wanted her to have more than midwifery, and so she went to nursing school, and then she just couldn't stand it, so she went ahead and went to family nurse practitioner school. So she has her master's in family nurse practitioner. She thinks about going for her doctorate all the time, but with 4 babies, that's going to be somewhat complicated. But knowing Melanie, to brag a little bit, if she wants to do it, she'll make it happen, and it'll just happen. And we'll do all we can to help us, of course. But one of the things I appreciate, a couple of things, many things I appreciate about Melanie. One is if you ask her a question about medicine, she's really good to ask you a lot of questions. What do you already know? And to encourage you to make the wisest decision you can, not just to take what our medical professionals tell us at face value. And we're glad that they have the education that they do and the expertise that they do, but really the decision to take medical choices belongs to you, and it belongs to the Lord. And so she'll talk to us a little bit about that. Another thing I love about Melanie is she's researched to the nth degree. So usually if I ask her a question about a medical dilemma and she doesn't know enough, which I'm not sure if anything is ever enough for Melanie, she'll go research it until the cows come home and then come back. And we always know that she's researched many sides, not just her own bias, but many sides, and that she's gone the extra mile, so she's like our little family encyclopedia, our doctor, as the kids call her. So I asked her a long time ago, would you speak during the month on physical wellness? Because I know she has a lot to offer. She's in the NACWE membership group, and is available for hire. I'll just go ahead and plug her, you know, if you need medical advice from afar, or if you're in our area, in the McKinney, north of Dallas area as well. She's very thorough. So appreciate that about you, Melanie, but among so many other things, that you're a good mommy and you've given us a bazillion grandchildren, and there are more to come, and all of those things as well. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, let you share your slides, and I'll kind of watch the chat room for you because it gets a little bit confusing. We'll try to hold some of the big questions till the end, but if there's something that I feel like we need to address right away, I'll pop in verbally and you'll hear me. Is that okay? So you're muted. I'm going to unmute you. Or maybe you. There you go.
All right.
So the floor is yours. Thank you.
All righty. Share my screen here. Maybe. Here we go.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. So I'm talking about entrepreneurial health, which there are a lot of different ways to define that, whether you're talking about being healthy as an entrepreneur or health in your business. But you know, this week or this month really, we're talking about physical wellness. So that's really what we're going over. This is some quick about me. I have 4 kids. This is the youngest, Mika. Hi. She's almost 6 weeks old, and I have her here at work with me. That's just kind of the way it goes. And you all know that as entrepreneurs, you just kind of have to make it happen, whatever, you know, however it goes. So I have 4 kids and we homeschool. And I own my own practice, Raphael Health Services. So I put my website down there, and I have a blog as well. And as Karen, my mom, will tell you, you really should be publishing a blog like every week, and I don't, so not following my own mom's advice, but you know, and I know I should, but so I became a midwife in 2010, like she said, and even before I finished midwifery school, I started nursing school because I knew that I discovered there were some things that people couldn't get or couldn't access when they had a midwife, and I wanted to increase access to healthcare, and so I went back to school and became an RN in 2011, and then a nurse practitioner in 2019. So January of last year, I got my FNP license. So I'm a family nurse practitioner so that I can care for the whole family. I do mostly pediatrics, but I care for the whole family. And like my mom said, I do a lot of, I can take care of you from afar. Sometimes, depends on the situation. I do a lot of telemedicine is what it's called. So I get to work from home with my kids. So anyway, that's me. So we're going to talk about maintaining health and what I call autonomous health. Excuse me. So as an entrepreneur, you rely a lot on other people for a lot of things, like maybe you hire a graphic designer, or you know, you hire someone to handle your social media accounts, or someone to do your taxes, you know, stuff like that. But you also do a lot of stuff on your own as an entrepreneur. And one of the things you really have to do for yourself is to watch after your health. So I'm going to talk about maintaining health and, like I said, what I call autonomous health. So it can be kind of tricky to know how to take care of your own health when there's so much conflicting information out there. Knowledge changes very quickly because of the widespread immediate access to knowledge and the efforts to conduct a lot of research. And so for the amount of time, this is kind of a funny concept, the amount of time it takes half of our knowledge to turn out to be false is called the half-life of knowledge. So if you think of everything that we know now, how long it'll take for half of everything we know to turn out to be false, that's called the half-life. And for hard sciences like physics, those are strong sciences, the half-life can be many decades. But for soft sciences like sociology and psychology and medicine and nutrition, it's a very, very brief time. In fact, I've read estimates as low as 3 years. So half of what we know in medicine turns out to be false in only 3 years. Which means, statistically, what that means is that most of what we come up with every year is false. So it's really hard for us to know how to be healthy when so much of what we learn or what we know is really false. So for this section, I'm going to try to stick with the stuff that we're pretty dadgum sure about. Diet, exercise, supplements, and behaviors are the 4 areas we're going to talk about. So first, diet. The first rule of thumb is no fad diets. This is true for a couple of very important reasons. So first, like I mentioned, most of the ideas we come up with in nutrition every year turn out to be false. And a fad diet is, by definition, new. And so, most likely it's based on false information, and we just don't know that it's false yet. But another reason is that fad diets tend to be a temporary thing. So a temporary diet can help you lose weight, but it won't help you maintain that weight, and it won't help you be healthy if you are the proper weight. And so it shouldn't be a diet. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. So fad diets don't help you because they're temporary things, and it needs to be a lifestyle change. And then third, fad diets tend to focus on losing weight, not on being healthy. You can be healthy if you're overweight, but fad diets don't really focus on helping you be healthy. They just focus on helping you lose weight. Next is fats. So we're gonna watch a really fun video about eating fats. We'll see whether this works. Okay. Can you hear it? No.
So
How
unshare it, and then you have to unshare probably your PowerPoint as well. And when you say share again, on the very left-hand corner, it'll say share computer sound, and you'll click on share computer sound, and then we will probably not have trouble here.
Okay. Okay, so we say stop share.
Yep. Now
I'll say
share, and on the
share.
bottom left-hand corner, it should say
computer sound. Got it.
Yay! I love it when we find the answers.
All right.
Okay.
Try this again. Here we go.
Good dish.
Can you hear it?
Oh, you're terrible. Wait! Stop! Don't eat that food.
Who are you? What are you doing in our house?
I'm from the future. I'm here to warn you, don't eat that food.
Why not?
The eggs, they're full of cholesterol.
What?
Cholesterol, it clogs up your arteries. Eating even just one egg can dramatically increase your chance of heart attack. Don't eat eggs.
Oh my God, thank you.
You're welcome. Godspeed.
Well, I guess I better take those eggs.
Wait! Stop!
You're back.
Yeah, you were wrong about the eggs.
How?
Well, it turns out there's two types of cholesterol. There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and eggs actually have both. So you can eat eggs, but just don't eat the egg yolks. So stick with the egg whites.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Godspeed. Wait! We were wrong about the eggs.
Again?
Yeah, okay, so it turns out that the amount of cholesterol in a food doesn't actually affect how much cholesterol ends up in your blood. The eggs are probably fine. In fact, we sort of don't even know what cholesterol is. But the steak! You can't eat the steak!
Why not?
Turns out that red meat increases your chance of heart attack. You have to cut out red meat. So no steak!
Thank you.
Godspeed.
What? No steak, mister.
What? Wait! We were wrong about the steak. It's the toast. Man was not meant to eat bread.
What do you mean man was not meant to eat bread?
Well, if you think about it, human beings should really only be eating what our Paleolithic ancestors ate. So, therefore, no bread, no toast.
How do you know what our Paleolithic ancestors ate?
Well, we just have to guess, right? I mean, we don't have any way of knowing. Okay, we're back to the Paleolithic. They are not doing well. I don't know what we were thinking. If anything, we should all be eating a lot more bread. Jeez. So I guess just ignore everything I've said and exercise.
Exercise, okay.
Yeah, you guys could probably use it. You've been just sitting here for the last 35 years.
It's been 5 minutes.
Right. Time travel. All right, well, Godspeed. Turns out it's genetic. Doesn't matter whether you exercise or what you eat. I'm sorry I ruined your meal.
I need 10 minutes.
Do you want some eggs?
I'd love some.
Cool. As this video kind of shows, there's a lot we don't know about diet in general, but especially about fats, where we've gone from, blaming heart disease on cholesterol, to blaming it on trans fats, to blaming it on saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. Is like we can't decide what really is the problem. Part of that is because in the 1950s, the Sugar Foundation paid off a bunch of scientists to produce some fraudulent research that would blame heart disease on fat instead of sugar, because sugar actually does contribute to heart disease. And so they paid off some researchers to blame it on fat. And then that was in the 1950s, for the last past 60 some odd years, we've been conducting all this research to find out which fat is the problem, and we can't decide which fat it is. So maybe fat does cause heart disease, maybe it doesn't, we don't know. But we do know that omega-3 fatty acids are very beneficial for your health. So there are 3 different types, or main types of omega fatty acids. It's omega-3, omega-6, and omega-9. And we get a lot of 6 and 9 in our regular diets, but omega-3, the primary source of that is fish, and most people don't eat fish at least twice a week. And so you really would benefit from taking it in a supplement, like in a pill form. Other sources, of omega fatty acids are flax seeds, chia seeds, some nuts like walnuts and soybeans. But that's pretty much all we know for sure about fats, is that omega-3s are very beneficial for your health. That actually lowers your cholesterol and lowers your risk of heart disease. And some of the healthiest populations are those that live near the ocean because they eat a lot of fish. Next is carbs. It seems like we've kind of always had a love-hate relationship with carbs. People have even invoked scripture, "You shall not live on bread alone," to say that we don't need carbs, or we need to eat really low carbs or whatever. But really a balanced diet that includes a decent amount of carbs is generally going to be the most healthy option. Low carb and low protein diets contribute to depression. So while low carb diets can help you to lose weight, it's probably not a good idea to do it long term. But other than that, just about the only thing we know for sure about carbs is that complex carbs, such as whole grain bread or pasta and brown rice, are healthier than simple carbs like white bread, white pasta, and white rice. Some of us also have a love-hate relationship with protein. I don't know if you're familiar with the impressions that vegans have a tendency to make online, but there are some very militant vegans who have a tendency to give a bad name to the whole group, and they'll say like, "Oh, you're committing murder if you eat an animal or whatever." So there's kind of a love-hate relationship with protein too. Protein is made up of amino acids. The human body uses 21 of the 22 amino acids, but 9 of them are called essential amino acids because your body is not able to make it. You have to consume it. It's essential for you to consume it. And so we call them essential amino acids. A whole protein is one that contains all 9 essential amino acids. It is possible to get all of the essential amino acids on a vegan diet, either by eating one of the few whole protein, meaning it has all 9 essential amino acids, one of the few whole protein plant sources, or mixing together a couple of different partial proteins so that you end up with a whole protein. I'm not going to get into the whole vegetarianism versus meat eater debate. I'm just going to say that it is possible, if you know what you're doing and you pay close attention, it is possible to eat to get enough protein and to get the right kinds of protein on a vegetarian or vegan diet. If you choose to go that route, though, one common problem is vitamin B12 deficiency, because that primarily comes from meat. So you might have to take a vitamin B12 supplement. So that's it for diet. Next, we're going to talk about exercise. Exercise helps both your physical health and your psychological health, both of which are important, obviously, for success as an entrepreneur. One technique to ensure you get enough exercise is by timing it. So it's generally recommended that you get at least 20 to 30 minutes of exercise per day. But some very interesting research has found that it doesn't really matter whether you get a chunk of 30 minutes at once or whether you get 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, et cetera, throughout the day that adds up to 30 minutes. It offers the same benefit. So that's a, it's a simple matter of just getting up and walking around for 5 minutes and then going back to work. Since our brains don't really work terribly well on several hours of focused work, you're supposed to really take a break every hour anyway, like every 50 minutes, I think is the rule. It's pretty simple to just say, okay, well, I'm going to work for 50 minutes and then get up and walk around for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to work for another 15 minutes and then get up and walk around for 5 minutes. And so it helps you to be more focused. It helps you to be more successful at your work. And it also gets you the exercise that you need, which helps with your physical health and also your psychological health, which again helps you work better and be a more effective entrepreneur. If you work at least 6 hours in a day, and you're doing 50 minutes of work and then 5 minutes of walking, then you'll get your 30 minutes of exercise every day. So another technique is active motion. In essence, the concept is that you stay in active motion while you are doing other things. So like, for example, walking or jogging in place while you're watching TV, or playing on the phone, fooling around on social media, talking on the phone or something like that. So a lot of the activities that we do while sitting can easily be converted to walking. Like what we're doing right now, you could, or I could, use myself as an example. I could stand up and just kind of sway or pace back and forth or whatever while listening to or giving a presentation. So those are kind of the two basic techniques to making sure that you get enough exercise. It can be, we can make it easy or we can make it hard, and I say let's make it easy. All right, so supplements, that's it for exercise. Our food is not as nutritious today as it was 100 years ago. They've actually tested the amount of vitamins and minerals in grains that we kept in storage for 100 years, from the very early 1900s. And they've also looked at the amount of vitamins and minerals in grains that came from pyramids that were thousands of years old, and compared it to our grain today. And even 100 years ago, there was a lot more nutrition in the grains that we had as compared to today. So we can presume it's probably true for fruits and vegetables as well, although obviously fruits and vegetables they don't keep well like grains do. So we can't really test that, but we have pretty good evidence that food was more nutritious 100 years ago or a few thousand years ago than it is today. And so a lot of people will recommend that you take vitamin supplements. So a multivitamin contains a mix of vitamins and a few minerals, and in general, taking a multivitamin designed for your sex and age can help to fill in the blanks from your diet. There's a lot of disagreement about what vitamins and minerals are necessary or harmful, but there's very little that's very certain. So I'm not going to, get into that. I'm just going to say that generally speaking, a multivitamin is beneficial, and just leave it at that. Most multivitamins, however, don't contain certain minerals that you only need in very, very tiny amounts, which are what we call trace minerals. They're things like chromium, copper, manganese, zinc, etc. So these are trace minerals, and they're usually not found in multivitamins. But some of them, like zinc, for example, can help to prevent you from getting sick. You may have noticed that some, flu prevention or supplements like vitamin C will often come with zinc in it, and we're just not getting enough zinc in our diet. So I recommend taking a trace mineral supplement in addition to a multivitamin. Next is vitamin D. It comes from our diet a tiny bit, mostly fish, again, but mostly it comes from the sun. Sunlight on your skin activates some processes in your body that turn precursors into vitamin D. So you need sunlight really to get most of the vitamin D that you're going to get. And since we spend so much more time indoors today as compared to, decades ago or thousands of years ago, we just don't get very much vitamin D, and most people are vitamin D deficient. And so most people need to take it in pill form. I had a friend who has a boat, and she and her whole family are out on the boat like all the time, every weekend, even in the winter. They're out on the boat, and they get tons of sun, and of course their vitamin D levels are great, but most of us are not like that, and we need to take it in pill form. Taking vitamin D is more effective than getting a flu shot at preventing flu. It can reduce your risk of the flu by about 60% or more, and it up to 85% reduced risk in kids with asthma. So vitamin D is a great way to help you to maintain your health. It also helps your body to absorb and use calcium to prevent osteoporosis. I recommend 2,000 units of vitamin D a day in spring and summer. and 4,000 units a day in fall and winter. And then when you're sick, you can even take more. You can take 10,000 units. I mentioned omega-3 fatty acids earlier when we were talking about fats. I'm not aware of any research showing one type of omega-3 supplement to be better than another, like fish oil versus flax oil or whatever. So I'm not going to recommend one or the other. I'm just going to say that we do know that an omega-3 supplement of some kind is beneficial to your health. It reduces your risk of heart disease and lowers your cholesterol and all that.
So
and
Melanie,
it can also help with depression.
one of the questions in the chat room, even before when you were talking about the omega-3s, is how often people get, that fishy taste and burping, and it doesn't set well on your stomach. What's the suggestion for that?
You can use a non-fish based omega-3 supplement.
What's it going to be made?
Because that's a common complaint, and so they make a lot of omega-3 supplements that have no fish oil in them at all. It's usually going to be like flax or borage oil or something like that.
Okay.
I think you can just pretty much just Google non-fish omega-3.
Okay.
And then I mentioned vegetarian or vegan diet can be low in vitamin B12, but if you're not vegetarian or vegan, you probably don't need to take any. And then I like to mention elderberry because it's a proven flu preventative, and it also shortens the length of illness with flu. So you can take it to prevent flu, and you can take it to treat flu. It's more effective than Tamiflu. So adults can take 2 teaspoons of elderberry syrup once a day to prevent illness, or 3 to 5 times a day when you're sick. There is also elderberry concentrate that's not the syrup form, and that the dose of that is like 1/3 of the syrup dose. But I don't like the taste personally, but it's nice that it doesn't come with a bunch of sugar in it. All right. And then that's it for supplements. So finally, we're going to talk about some behaviors that can help you to maintain good health. First is hand hygiene. This includes coughing into your elbow instead of coughing into your hands, not touching your face, and washing your hands frequently. This alone is super effective at preventing spread of flu and other illnesses, especially norovirus. Norovirus is the GI bug, and it's usually spread by unwashed hands, and it's also usually mistaken for food poisoning. So most of the time when someone says, oh, I got food poisoning from that restaurant or whatever, it actually was just norovirus, and it just so happened that it took effect right after they ate at this restaurant. Influenza virus is airborne, but it ends up on people's hands, and people touch doorknobs, and then other people touch those doorknobs and get it on their hands. And so the number one way that influenza is spread is actually with unwashed hands, even though it's an airborne bug. Another helpful trick for flu prevention is using a humidifier. Influenza virus thrives in dry air, such as winter air, and it doesn't spread well in humid air. So running a humidifier in your house has been shown to reduce the spread of the flu virus. A friend of mine has 4 boys, 2 to 6 years old. And the second child caught influenza B this year. And she immediately started dosing him and his brothers with vitamin D and elderberry, and ran humidifiers 24/7, multiple humidifiers in her house, and no one else caught it. And her son actually got over it in only 2 days. Next is a face mask. It's not really popular on this side of the pond. You may have seen pictures of like Asians wearing face masks. And when I lived in Japan, it was like, in the winter time, it was like everyone was wearing a face mask. Because that's what they do to try to prevent, the spread of flu and all that. But it is actually proven to reduce your risk of catching the flu. So I've noticed some people, like today, I had a family come in for well visits, but one of their kids was sick, and so they made her wear a mask. And I was like, that was really nice of them to do that, because it really does help to prevent the spread of the flu. Don't know whether it helps with coronavirus. Sorry. Last, I want to talk about some basic psychological health behaviors that can help you to maintain your physical health. So our minds have a lot of power over our bodies, and we know this. On the extreme end, there have even been cases where someone used hypnosis instead of anesthesia for major surgeries. But on the less extreme end, I have two very simple psychological health practices that can directly or indirectly affect your physical health. So one is think positive. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it really does work. In 1996, Dr. Carlson wrote a book titled "Don't Sweat the Small Stuff," and it's all small stuff. So I haven't read the book, so I can't really speak on the content, but the title pretty much says it all. It's all small stuff, just don't sweat it. So, but thinking positive is not confined to just telling yourself positive things or deciding not to get upset over small things. And again, it's all small stuff. It goes further into a huge problem called bitterness. So we've all had experiences where people upset us and that we can carry with us for a little while, but it turns into bitterness when we don't let it go and we remain upset about it for more than a brief time. And I've been there. I'm sure most of you have been there. Hebrews 12:14-15 tells us to live peacefully with people and not let a root of bitterness spring up. Ephesians 4:31 tells us to put bitterness away from ourselves. In Matthew 6 and Mark 11, Jesus said that we should forgive others for their sins against us, and that if we don't forgive others, God won't forgive us. The Apostle Paul echoed this teaching in Colossians 3 and Ephesians 4. And in Proverbs 25, Solomon writes that if you care for your enemy in spite of what they've done to you, you heap burning coals on his head. In Romans 12, Paul tells us that God says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." So there are a great many other Bible verses about bitterness and the importance of forgiving people, but the key message is the same. Don't be bitter, God will take care of it. The point I'm trying to make is that this is kind of a big deal. Like, if you have any bitterness in your life, you need to forgive the person or persons who've offended you. Bitterness increases your blood pressure, depresses your immune system, negatively affects your metabolism, causes chronic headaches, and causes heart disease and other organ dysfunction. It also causes other psychological problems such as depression and anxiety. Bitterness raises the stress hormone cortisol, which makes you more likely to drink alcohol and abuse prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and recreational drugs. And of course, cortisol also negatively affects your health as well, because it's basically chronic stress. People who are bitter die younger. In fact, bitterness is such a problem, both psychologically and physically, that psychologists have termed it post-traumatic embitterment disorder, or PTED. In short, when you hold on to bitterness, you're only hurting yourself. Choosing to forgive, let go, and move on directly benefits your physical and psychological health. And it doesn't mean that you have to trust the person who hurt you, because they may not be trustworthy, and you'll hurt yourself again by trusting them and letting them hurt you again. I'm not saying that you need to trust them and put yourself back in the same kind of situation, but what I am saying is that you need to forgive and move on, because choosing not to forgive just hurts yourself. And then the next is to take responsibility. In other words, don't blame all your problems on other people. This goes back to the bitterness example, because people who blame their problems on others indirectly cause themselves to be a little bitter against essentially the whole world around them, because it's never your fault, it's always someone else's fault. Blaming outside forces becomes a habit that can be particularly hard to break. As parents, my husband and I tried to teach our kids what caused their mistakes or their mishaps, when they happen. So for example, if a child knocked a cup onto the ground, we might say, you know, that happened because you left the cup too close to the edge of the table. We were hoping that they would learn from this, you know, what is the root cause that caused my mistakes to happen, and so that they could avoid those root causes in the future, like pushing the cup back from the edge of the table. But instead, we discovered that we were teaching my second child, Lottie, to blame other people, because every time something happened, we were basically blaming them. We were saying, look, this happened because of this, or this happened because you did that. And she learned from that to blame other people. And I mean, sometimes it was really ridiculous. Like one time she said to me something to the effect of, you know, this toy broke because you didn't stop me from throwing it on the ground. I was like, what? I was so flabbergasted that initially I just found myself arguing with her. I was like, you're the one who threw the toy, and I didn't even touch it. I didn't have anything to do with it. But then I adopted a new tactic of taking verbal responsibility for my part in events. I would say, oops, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left the paint on the table where Clara could reach it. And in doing so, I was trying to set a good example for my kids. And it did actually fix the problem of Lottie blaming everyone else for everything that happened. The first time I took explicit verbal responsibility for something that happened, my kids were fascinated. And Lottie in particular repeated what I said like 5 times. First as questions and then as statements. But then within a week, she started taking verbal responsibility for her part in events as well. She'd say, oops, I filled the cup too full and that's why I spilled it. And stuff like that. So it was kind of surprising to me what happened when I took responsibility rather than trying to teach her, look, this is what you did and this is the problem that it caused. But another side effect that I hadn't anticipated was that our family dynamics became more positive. If 2 of us were involved, and you know, usually there's 2 problems involved in contributing to, you know, what happened to make a mistake occur, then I took responsibility for my part, and I didn't say anything about my kid's part. And when before long, you know, my kids were filling in the blanks and saying, oh, that was your part, this was my part. And they were taking responsibility. When I took responsibility for my part, my kids would add in an apology for their part, and it made our family dynamics just more positive in general. But whether or not the other people involved in negative outcomes take responsibility for their part, you should still take responsibility for your part. When you do so, you not only, you know, set a good example, which is really important for a parent, maybe not as much for an entrepreneur. Maybe you don't care about that as much. You're like, whatever, that person's just a jerk. but you not only set a good example, you also contribute to a positive atmosphere, not just in your own work, but in your family dynamics, in your workplace, just everywhere. And that reduces your stress levels. It reduces your propensity to develop bitterness, all of which contributes to physical health, not to mention psychological health. It also can contribute to good business success because people are happy to work with someone who is humble and takes responsibility for themselves, but generally hate working with someone who blames everything on other people, even if they're right. So that's it for maintaining health. The last brief section is autonomous health. Autonomy refers, well, actually, you know, do we want to, were there any questions on the last section? Any other questions that I should address? I can't.
Yeah, Angela has one.
I have one, Melanie.
Okay.
Your ideas about taking personal responsibility and therefore not always putting the blame on someone else. But I know people who always try to take the responsibility, and then they become embittered in themselves because they're always trying to take the responsibility. And that's not healthy either. So I don't know what you meant, but
no, you definitely should only take legitimate responsibility. Like, you don't apologize for things that are not your fault, that have nothing to do with you. Yeah. And if you're working with people that exhaust you like that, maybe you don't need to be working with those people. You know.
So you know, Melanie, speaking of so you had written an article for this counseling practice, years ago on bitterness. And
I did.
yeah, it's really good. It's awesome. I mean, I would love to bring you a copy of it and see if maybe you want to reuse it or even expand on it, because I think you took us a little deeper in the bitterness issue. And then when we were homeschooling, your generation, you'll remember that we had a homeschool pastor who talked about some studies, a lot of studies about people being in mental hospitals and mental institutions, and that the ones that recovered much more quickly were the ones they gave certain responsibilities. Do you remember that?
I
So
do.
I
Yeah.
would love to see, speaking of blogging every week, I would love to see some blogs on those two issues, on the take responsibility and think positive. I think there's a lot
All right.
more here. That would be great.
I'll keep that in mind.
In your spare
Maybe
time.
I can just copy paste what I said and turn it into a blog post. Okay, so now we're going to talk about autonomous health. So autonomy refers to being able to act the way that you desire, as opposed to under the influence or instruction of someone else. Complete autonomy is not possible. So for example, even if you own your own business and you get to be your own boss, you still have to pay taxes and you still have to follow applicable laws. That's certainly the case for me as a nurse practitioner. And I'm tempted at times to kind of complain about the extra laws that I have to follow that my doctor doesn't. But the fact remains that she has a ton of laws, a whole slew of laws that she has to follow too. So complete autonomy is not, it just isn't a thing. But within the bounds of law and ability, you can exercise some autonomy over your own health. So first, you need to know your rights. You have the right to be treated with dignity regardless of your sex or race. You have the right to privacy. For example, you can insist on a closed door or low voices so that people don't overhear your conversations. You have the right to a clean and safe environment. You have the right to say no. You have the right to seek a second opinion. You have the right to seek alternative treatment. You even have the right to maintain silence, and sometimes that's the wisest choice. For example, a health provider may write you a prescription and you may opt for alternative treatment, but instead of telling your provider that, you may choose to simply smile and take the prescription and then not get it filled. I mean, you have to decide what's right for you, but sometimes silence is the right choice. You do not have the right to treatment of non-emergent conditions by anyone. And you do not have the right to treatment of emergent conditions by anyone other than an emergency department. So in the same way that a standard business has the right to refuse service to almost anyone for almost any reason beyond, sexism and racism, that sort of thing, health professionals have the right to refuse service to almost anyone for almost any reason. For example, if you come into the ER for a non-emergent condition, they can refuse to treat you. They usually won't, because it's a lot of paperwork to do that, because they have to prove that you didn't have an emergency. But legally they can. And if you come to a regular doctor's office or an urgent care for an emergency, they can and often should simply send you onto the ER instead. So you have the right to be treated well, and you have the right to say no, and you have the right to seek a second opinion, but you don't necessarily have the right to be treated by a specific someone for a specific something. And that brings us to the next part. Again, here it is again, take responsibility. If you want the right to healthcare your way, you also have to take responsibility for your healthcare. So, for example, I had a young patient. He was 30-something years old. He had very high blood pressure, and his father had died of a heart attack at a relatively young age, like 55 or something like that. So, I told him he either had to make some serious lifestyle changes, or he needed to take a prescription, because without one or the other or both, he was looking at a heart attack and death by age 50 or 60, just like his father. So he really didn't want the prescription, and so he made some serious lifestyle changes. And in his case, it meant like cutting out energy drinks and sodas and coffees and stuff like that. He was drinking a lot of it, and it did bring his blood pressure down. So he had the right to say no. He said no to the prescription. I wrote the prescription, and he just didn't get it filled. He did what he needed to do to bring his blood pressure down, and he did a good job. But in order to have that choice, he had to take responsibility for his own health. But for a less obvious example, if you want someone to take care of you, you have to earn it. If you repeatedly take advantage of someone, like refusing to pay your bill or calling for frivolous complaints or expecting to get tons of free advice over the phone, you can't be surprised when they cut you off. Alternatively, if you are rude to your health provider, then unless you're in the ER with an emergent health condition, they're not obligated to continue to care for you, and they have the right to fire you as a patient simply because you were rude. So if you want to have rights, again, part of it is taking responsibility. You have to be a person who is worth treating, if that makes sense. Of course, I am, my passion is helping people to access healthcare who otherwise wouldn't be able to access healthcare. And so I get a lot of people who, because I take anyone, I get a lot of people who were fired from their previous health providers, and most of them it's for bad reasons, like they were fired for racist or sexist reasons, or they were fired because they had a difference of opinion philosophically with their medical provider. And I don't think those are good reasons to fire someone. But some people got fired because they were rude. And there aren't a lot of people like me out there who will just take anyone and take care of you no matter what, even if you're rude to me. There are very few people out there like me, and so you can't bet on getting someone like me who's going to take care of you no matter what. So part of taking responsibility in order to get the healthcare that you deserve is to be deserving of the healthcare by not being rude. So on the one hand, for autonomy in your healthcare, you should know your rights, but on the other hand, you have to take responsibility. So that's it for my webinar on entrepreneurial health. Do we have any other questions? Let's see if there's anything in the chat group.
Oh, there's a lot.
I have a comment. I'm working with a client right now, and he calls them significant emotional events, but it could be like cancer, medical, financial crisis, divorce, whatever. But he says in medical care, he says that, when we get a second opinion or we just listen to our doctor and we don't know our own rights or whatever, we just do it, where we would never just buy a car because Karen says, buy this car. Like, you just would never do it. You do all this research. And he's like, how come we don't do that with our second opinion? Or should we take this drug or do this vaccine or anything? He's like, why is this continuum goes this way? That it's more valuable to do more research there. Why do we care more about our toaster oven, Yeah. And that was just the diagram that he had in the book. Just like, yeah, it's true. We do that all the time. We just like take it.
Yeah.
And you've actually helped me think through that, because that's like your approach as well. Medical,
why do we do this?
They practice, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Just because the expert says it doesn't mean it's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Could be right for most people, but wrong for you.
I'm curious, Melanie. Thank you for your input. I'm really curious about the vegan life, because one of my daughters, who I love, thoroughly believes in it, although she's really more vegetarian. Her husband's more vegan. And I got into some of it. And to be honest, cutting back for me from the meats and dairies and white flours and stuff, I was having arthritic pain in my knee. It was horrible. But when I stopped the sugar, the white flours, and all the just meat, it basically is stopped. I was surprised, because it's one of those things you don't even realize is going on. But so I'm curious, because I sort of found a quasi balance that works for me. If I have to have some protein, I have to. And the bean stuff also produces, as we aging ladies know, a little belly full of gas that will make you more miserable than you've ever known. So I like to just, kind of thank you for sharing, and see if you have any other thoughts. Because I was doing more like vegan breakfast, some whole grain cereal, meat in the middle of the day with a vegetable, and then later a lighter vegetable kind of, vegetable fruit type
Mhm.
of meal, but not, it's not really meat,
Mhm.
unless it's just like a couple of ounces,
Mhm.
sort of seasoning.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're a meat eater, usually 4 ounces of meat per day is going to be enough. If you're not a meat eater, you do have to pay more attention to what you're eating to make sure you get a whole protein. And I'll be honest, I'm not very good with that. I'm not very good with, I've never tried a vegan or vegetarian diet, so I really can't say, aside from, like Lent. I've never really done that, so I really can't say.
But I think one thing you said, Roberta, hit the nail on the head, that you finally found a kind of pattern and a process that really worked for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't tell anybody else to do what I did, but just accidentally, excuse me, Karen, I kind of stumbled into and then realized, oh, wait a minute, something's not hurting here anymore.
And I was thinking of you, Roberta, and the frustrating thing for me is, once you do all this trial and error and figure out what works for you, then our bodies change. It's like Melanie said, I had never thought about the half-life of knowing. Well, it applies to me too. What worked for me several months ago might not work for me. And then you're going through, you've come through cancer and chemo and radiation and 1,000 other, trials and this and that and the other thing. Who knows what's going to work for you when you're kind of more at a balanced phase of your life and everything. That's the frustration, I think, for me. One, honestly, is adopting the mindset and heart set to change the lifestyle, which is my biggest struggle. I can fast, I can eat wisely, but will I? And when I do the intermittent fasting thing, I can drop it like crazy. And then, here I am back. Right now, I loved what you said about the mindset and taking responsibility. I just kept kind of going back to that. I didn't let everybody introduce themselves, so I'll hang on. My appointment is at 3:15. I have a few minutes. If you need to go, raise your hand and come in and talk about you for a minute or two, a quick minute, probably, and then we'll pray out and let Melanie go back to her nursing baby every hour.
Yeah. I have a patient who's supposed to be here at 3 and they're not here yet.
Oh,
so I'll hang out until they show up.
I will say the hospital didn't have any concept of healthy diet.
Oh, no.
And so it was kind of hard for me because the stuff they were feeding me was stuff I would not eat. But their vegan version would have been even worse for me. So I was like, look it.
I can't imagine a vegan diet in the hospital.
Terry's a nurse too, Melanie. Connections there. She's a lactation consultant too, so I thought it was very appropriate that you nursed your baby through the entire webinar. If y'all want to come in and say who you are and where you are so people can see you, or I know it's in the chat room, I know that. You can say the chat room. All right, we're going. Thank you, Melanie. I love you all the way in Waco. We'll see you this evening when you get home. Looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to dumping one of your daughters
All right.
on you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Let me pray for you. Father God, bless Melanie and these 3 beautiful little girls, and Derek too. Don't leave him out. And just the work that she's able to do in Waco. And Lord, I would just pray that you would create that kind of a clinic atmosphere for her here at home in McKinney, so there's less traveling to do. But we're grateful that she's able to meet the need there as well. Thank you for her expertise and her knowledge and her willingness to just dig deep and find information for us. God bless everyone here, especially as we go about the rest of our day. Tuesdays are my busiest day, and I'm not wise about my health and my choices on Tuesdays. I just zoom through. So I'm kind of convicted, Lord, that things need to change in that area for sure. We want to do the work you've called us to do and do it well and do it in ways that bring you glory and honor, in ways that draw people closer and closer to you. So I'm grateful for medical professionals like Melanie and Jerry who are believers, who are patient with us, patient with us patients. That's kind of hard to do sometimes. So may all we do this week and this day, really, in this month of physical wellness, balanced with the knowledge that our bodies are holy temples, and we need to treat them as such, Lord, especially if we want to do the work you've called us to do. So help us to keep that in mind, to lift each other up in prayer, especially those who are suffering with medical issues even now. We're surrounded. There's so many of us. So just help us with our wise choices, Lord, and God bless Melanie and the babies. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right. Thank you so much. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye, everybody. That was